I am mildly obsessed with unsolved mysteries. Not because I feel like I can do what the greatest minds of our time failed to do and solve them myself, but because the ambiguity surrounding them leads to all sorts of wild speculation and theories. I'm not about to talk about dark matter or explaining the origins of Stonehenge, because I talk about video games on this show, and video games have plenty of unexplained nonsense about them. Like, how did the PlayStation Classic become such a shit show, and why do people keep buying games made by EA? The world may never know. There's a lot of moving parts to the average video game, and therefore it becomes very hard for every small detail to come to its natural conclusion. So maybe you'll have a few things that aren't explained properly, or some background details that you could have used some more information on, and this is the sort of shit that the internet eats for breakfast. And I'm a hungry boy. I'm not saying that we need answers on every tiny detail that exists within a game, but I think we've all had moments where we've experienced something in a game that wasn't given a sufficient explanation. We tend to get swept up by the magic of Easter eggs and little hidden references that feel like rewards for diligent players, but sometimes there's stuff that even the most attentive individuals just can't crack. It's this kind of wild speculation that I need in my life from time to time, and with Smash Bros choosing DLC characters by blindly throwing at a dartboard, this is a good compromise. Put Gaster in Smash Bros, you fucking cowards! The nature of an unsolved mystery incites a certain sinister air to it. A mystery hasn't been solved not because the answer isn't worth the effort, but because no one could possibly handle the horrible truth. If you start thinking of it like that, then you start fabricating conspiracies that permeate your ultimately very simple video games, and often it's just a case of simple oversight being mixed with an overactive imagination. Anyway, now that I've undermined the entire point of this video, I'd like to talk about Animal Crossing and the weird, unexplained quirks of some of its characters. There's something existentially disturbing about someone like Blanca not having a face until you draw one yourself. But then we have Zipper T. Bunny, the mascot of Bunny Day, which is what Animal Crossing calls Easter. He's secretly terrifying. I mean, not really, but there's enough to work with here, primarily all the signs that point to Zipper being some kind of creature in a costume. It's right there in his name, and also clear as day on the back of his model. Plus, Zipper makes numerous references to the costume he's wearing and how this isn't his true form. Which is fine, I don't necessarily need to know who or what is under the mask, but a bunch of other residents during Bunny Day say how creeped out they are by Zipper, and now this is information that I'm suddenly very invested in. All I know is that his mouth moves while talking, which probably indicates that he isn't wearing a costume, or maybe he's one of those weird animatronics from Five Nights at Freddy's. That's a crossover I could do without. We've got this habit of attaching more value to a video game glitch than it really warrants. I'm not saying you can't enjoy them, it's just that sometimes people read between the lines and use a glitch as an example of a greater issue at play that has somehow snuck its way into a video game, like a curse or something. Or maybe, you know, just breaks the game. Game-breaking glitches are the one type of glitch that most people fear, since the repercussions for triggering one is often a lot more serious than, oh look, everything's weird now. We're talking corrupted save files, ruined game code, and permanent damage done to the very makeup of a game. Generally, these aren't glitches that you'd actively pursue, which gives them an extra edge when talking about how mysterious they are. Saints Row 2 has had an infamous game-breaking glitch for a long time now, which is equal parts cryptic and surprisingly terrifying, actually. Not everything on this video is going to be scary, trust me. The Freezer is the name given to a glitch zombie that shows up in the Zombie Uprising minigame within Saints Row 2, but only after you've snuck out of bounds and explored the regular game world. He appears for a frame before disappearing straight away and usually freezing your game shortly after, hence the name. It's most likely to show up on the Xbox version of the game, at which point you'll notice that your copy of Saints Row 2 doesn't work properly anymore. It'll usually crash upon reopening the game, rendering this copy fairly useless now, and that is part of why this glitch is so mysterious. Studies of the freezer have been limited since you're destroying a copy of Saints Row 2 every time, so there hasn't been a conclusive reason for what causes the glitch and what the glitch even is. All I know is that if a figure showed up for 1 frame before crashing my game, I'd be fucking terrified. It's got all the hallmarks of a creepy urban legend, but apparently it's quite real. Just be glad it's not more common. Viral marketing campaigns have really started to annoy me lately. I'm not sure what the general consensus is with this particular type of marketing and whether or not I'm part of some kind of majority or just an incredibly old man, but it often feels like an open invitation for companies to get away with whatever they like. As long as it grabs a decent amount of attention, it should help the game enter the public consciousness in a way that will boost sales by a decent amount. If it ends up being controversial, that's even better! In 2013, CAMDROME seemed to be going down a very similar route, with a booth in PAX Prime consisting of an old computer monitor covered in fake blood that showed off a series of clips depicting people being killed in mostly comedic ways. Is this even viral marketing? What am I doing again? CAMDROME has all the hallmarks of an unusual game that felt the need to use atypical means of getting people excited for it, before launching some kind of kooky video game that never really justified having a setup as wacky as this. I'm not sure what kind of game this would lead to, like a more disturbing version of Night Trap maybe? That'd be cool. We actually don't know for sure because this elaborate ARG has lost a lot of momentum over the years and hasn't had an update of any kind for the last 2, with its official Twitter account looking very dormant at the moment. Supposedly members of Team Meat were involved, the same guys behind Super Meat Boy and The Binding of Isaac, but it's been 6 years since CAMDROME first showed itself at PAX Prime, and even with all of the cryptic clues and hints, we don't know a damn thing about it. Just know that if some creepy webcam game pops up out of nowhere, it's got a bit of history, and an ARG that not enough people played. Can't win them all, I suppose. Lots of weird shit happened in the 1980s, and some of it was related to video games. The arcade scene was still alive and kicking around that time, and so was the blissfully ignorant world of video game urban legends. The spread of information wasn't what it is today, and so stories of a certain arcade machine that was under government surveillance that disappeared without a trace, I feel like there was an element of Chinese whispers about that. You know, there was probably a consistent story at some point, but people just kept adding to it, and now it barely resembles reality. I don't know, I never really bought into the whole Polybius thing, but I was definitely convinced that Berserk caused people who played it to die shortly afterwards. That sounds metal as fuck. When you think of a game that kills people who play it, you'd likely imagine some kind of epilepsy-inducing clusterfuck, or at least one of those MMORPGs where people get so invested that they forget to shit and die that way. But Berserk is a pretty standard arcade shooter. It's got a bouncing, smiling face as a main villain, which has horrific undertones considering that this was one of the last sights that a couple of poor souls saw before they died in the 80s. But I don't think anyone is blaming the game for the deaths of Jeff Daly in 1981 and Peter Bukowski a year later. It is, however, a little off that they both died of heart attacks shortly after playing the game of their lives and setting high scores. Either there was something up with Berserk, or people were just way more into games than they are nowadays. And we're pretty obsessive nowadays, so damn. Okay, so maybe I lied about not everything on this video being creepy, but I think that just comes with the territory. It's like they said in that one Batman movie, you always fear what you don't understand, and when you've got a bunch of mysteries where the solution isn't screaming you in the face, your mind starts wandering and thinking up the craziest answers possible. I suppose it's also possible that something was set up and not followed through with, leaving this dangling thread with no clear payoff. Or, like when Pokemon X and Y had that creepy ghost girl in Lumio City and didn't even try to explain it. Hey, that's okay, why would I need this explained? Stop being ridiculous! Pokemon likes to dabble with the supernatural from time to time, since it's the name of one of the 18 Pokemon types, but the more striking instances of using ghostly figures comes when said ghosts are human. You've got 2 ghosts in Sinnoh's old chateau, you've got the little girl on the Marvelous Bridge and in the strange house in Unova, and then this madness in Kalos. You explore some of the surrounding buildings in Lumio City, and then, on the second floor of some random tower block, you find a ghost girl who appears behind you, NANI? Decides to not use a walk cycle, and then says,
"No, you're not the one."
Which is encouraging, I suppose. She's gone as soon as she arrives, with only a few clues elsewhere in the city that maybe paint a picture of some kind of supernatural being that was looking for someone in the usual place? I have no idea, but I know I'm glad that you're not the person she was looking for. I'm not sure I'm emotionally prepared for that scenario. In the past, I've thought how I would handle secrets if I was to make a video game. At this point, I've pretty much accepted that I'd be a huge dick about it and lead people on a wild goose chase that spawns from cryptic messages that ultimately don't lead anywhere. From that perspective, these unsolved mysteries are goddamn perfect for me, since they lack the final conclusion that drives me insane enough to replicate it in my own work. Grand Theft Auto does this a lot, and I'm never sure if it's Rockstar running out of time and manpower to follow through on these hidden messages, or giving their fanbase the finger because they know they can get away with it. There's always hope though, since Bigfoot wasn't in San Andreas, but turned up years later in GTA 5. That might be how long it takes to learn anything about Mount Chiliad. First rule of open world games is that if you have a very large mountain in your overworld, the average player will at some point attempt to scale it. I saw that Skyrim demo, that scarred me for life, damn it! Along the way, you'll likely stumble across this mysterious mural, which is my favourite type of mural by the way, that seems to depict key points within Mount Chiliad that all seem to stem from a UFO, a cracked egg, and a man using a jetpack apparently. There's clearly something very interesting bubbling under the surface that you'd think would be turned into an in-game event or some kind of DLC, but we're nearly 6 years removed from the release of GTA 5 and we've heard absolutely fucking nothing. Maybe Rockstar had plans, but they were buried under the weight of GTA Online and Red Dead Redemption 2 and Red Dead Online. I mean, I can understand that, but please don't kill these single-player experiences for me. I love them too much. For certain mysteries, you have to remember that not everything was always likely to get a cast iron explanation. Leaving things up in the air is often the best thing to do, since creative speculation might not be able to give any kind of genuine closure, but it's often better than the real thing. I've read some wild fan theories in my time, but it's the more realistically plausible ones that are memorable to me, because they expand on something that the game never outright explained. Some of the theories are obvious to piece together, but that doesn't make them any less intriguing to think about. In the first Red Dead Redemption game, there's this strange man, literally called Strange Man by the Red Dead Wiki, who is the focus of a series of side quests called I Know You, where you're tasked with either doing the right thing in 3 separate scenarios or causing trouble. Sounds very godlike, doesn't it? Well, yeah, kind of. Reaching the end of this side quest doesn't give you any answers on who this man is, and in fact, it doesn't really matter what choices you make with the side quest because the game will always end in the same way, and the strange man will always walk away at the end unaffected by the bullets that John Marston fires at him. So he's clearly some kind of higher power that tests John to see what kind of man he is, but this is never stated anywhere inside or outside Red Dead Redemption in any official capacity. Honestly, I feel like it's better this way, since the strange man would lose a lot of mystique if he straight up said, yeah, I'm God, what about it? God wears a top hat, fucking yeah? But fan theories do enough to fill in some big gaps that the developers deliberately left behind. Not every hole in a game is a mistake. 3D Mario games have gotten really good at world design lately. This is something I noticed in Super Mario Odyssey, where you can get an overview of each kingdom and feel how distinctly different they are from each other, and this is practically required in a large globe-trotting adventure so it doesn't feel too repetitive. But it is nice to see in more unusual places. This is a quality that I feel is underrated within the Super Mario Galaxy games. Sure, they do a lot of things very well, but I'm impressed how much contrast Nintendo were able to get while still maintaining the overall space theme of the game. You know, space is large and potentially full of all sorts of weird and wonderful planets with their own landscapes and inhabitants. Some of them might be watching you right now. In fact, they are, because I have proof, and this still hasn't been explained, and I still can't sleep at night. Talking about the HELLVALLEYSKYTREE takes me back, man. It must have been years since I mentioned how fucking creepy it is that there's just these creatures hanging out in Super Mario Galaxy 2's Shiverburn Galaxy. It's not an inherently spooky level by any means, just one that takes place in space and uses fire and ice themes like that other galaxy in the first game. Obviously you can't interact with these funky little aliens since they're just a texture, but it's a texture that has the file name HELLVALLEYSKYTREE. Perhaps not the kind of whimsical wonderment that you'd expect from a Mario game. The background's called Beyond Hell Valley, which is equally horrifying, but all of these only exist as mere textures and nothing more substantial than that. Hence why Super Mario Galaxy 2 never explains this, because it doesn't need to. Still, not the first time or the last time that Mario games have creepy hidden figures in the background of levels. Must be some sort of complex at this point. I thought long and hard about games with cliffhanger endings and decided that, nah, we've got way cooler shit to cover instead. There have been countless games that teased a sequel or some kind of extended narrative and yet failed to deliver on that promise, leaving the world with an ending that just kinda hangs there. I like to imagine that we've all come to terms with the fact that we're never gonna see an official conclusion to the Half-Life story, which is very annoying considering the last game ended on a cliffhanger. You don't see anyone caring too hard about a third Portal game because Portal 2 wrapped things up pretty nicely. No one's like, oh man, we need to know more about GLaDOS or Wheatley because everything that needs to be said has already been said. And then we got Half-Life 2 over here opening with some strange man and never really explaining who he is. Well, that's just great. So we're not getting any more Half-Life games, and we have no idea who G-Man is, which is really irritating considering how he bookends the second game, and seems to be operating on a different plane of existence to everyone else. He's an interesting character because we know virtually nothing about him, and he was always used in such a way to inspire a bit of discussion for who he is and why he's so important to the Half-Life story. He may well be important and something more than just a creepy, well-dressed man who shows up at the most inopportune times to spout vague platitudes about humanity and destiny, but we kinda done, guys. Fucking cliffhangers, ruining everything. I've made so many videos at this point that I get chronic deja vu and an overwhelming sense that I've talked about something before. I didn't have to check if I've talked about unsolved video game mysteries because I can remember those kind of details. But I did have to check if I've mentioned the clinically insane riddle from Trials HD and how a simple racing game was hiding one of the most convoluted Easter eggs in all of gaming. I talked about it a few years ago, but what I didn't know is that developers Red Lynx were all too willing to go around again 3 years later with Trials Evolution. Except this time, things were even crazier. So, a quick rundown on how the Trials game do their huge riddles. They hide objects in the background of levels that reveal secret coded messages that can be translated as instructions to find a hidden song that is actually Morse code for a website full of picture clues, and suddenly, hey, there's 4 packages hidden across the globe that reveal keys and 300-year-old documents, and occasionally I have to remind myself that this came from a silly little bike racing game. The riddle has reached the point now where hopefully the final clue is saying that something is hidden under the Eiffel Tower in Paris that can be opened by the 4 keys on Saturday the 1st of August 2113, the year 2113. This is a mystery that has a solution, but it's an answer that no one alive today is likely to see. That warm feeling on your shoulder might be the brain leaking out the side of your head, I don't know. This is RabbidLuigi, and I don't think you can underestimate the amount of effort that goes into making huge ARGs like this, and it almost makes fun of the idea by making it so ridiculously complicated, and it doesn't even matter what the reward's gonna be at the end. It's the journey that matters, and the journey's been insane. It might continue to be for the next 100 years, you know? Trials Fusion didn't really have a lot of secrets in it, but Trials Rising came out in February of this year, so eventually we might be doing the same with that game. We'll be deep sea diving for clues in no time at all.